I am Ken Coleman. She is LysaTerKeurst, and we are backstage at Cat12West Coast at the lovely Mariners Church in Irvine, California. And Lisa, let's get right to it. Earlier today, you spoke at Catalyst Labs.
Yes.
And the topic, or the main message of what you shared, was your reaction determines your reach. Wow. Simple statement, a lot of power packed in that. Unpack the talk and what you shared with our audience.
Okay. Well, I think sometimes as leaders, we're very good at measuring our actions because we want to act like a leader, look like a leader, smell like a leader, you know? So we're very careful at measuring those actions. But I would dare say that our ability to influence someone's life doesn't come from our carefully measured actions as much as what happens when someone bumps into our happy. And how we react in that moment really will determine the level of influence we are allowed to have in this person or these people. And so your reaction determines your reach, is basically saying my reactions, they matter, because it determines how far reaching my influence can go.
Boy, that's so true. We've seen that in big time sports this year in leadership. Our reaction can crush a career that has been legendary. Jim Tressel at Ohio State is confronted with.
I know so much about all these sports.
Are you an Ohio State fan?
I am clueless, but
stay with
educate
me on
me.
Our audience is following. We see big time sports leaders who get some information on their athletes and they cover it up. And so that's an improper reaction. You're also talking about emotion.
That's
what I want you to address here is not just that emotion, and then sometimes we just take a situation and we just blow it. This is a big theme in your new book, Unglued. We'll talk more about that. But I want to ask you, what have you learned about us humans? Why do we blow our reaction so much?
Well,
when we know better, right?
We do. Well, here's what we do. We measure our reactions according to who we're reacting to. And I've identified there's 4 kinds of reactions. There's exploders who blame others. That's what I do with my kids. Like, if you would have put your shoes on time, and when I said, and picked up the toy, I wouldn't have fallen, and we wouldn't be late, and because you didn't put on your shoes and pick up your toys, now we're running late. So that's an exploder that blames others. And an exploder doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's exploding. You know, it's just that we're pushing our emotions outward. And emotions always move, so they're either going to go out or go in. So that's where this is coming from. So exploders that blame others, that's what I do with my kids. Exploders that shame themselves. That's what I do with the lady at the airport. When my luggage is lost, she's on the phone with her boyfriend, and she puts her hand up. And, you know, she's basically saying to me, you're not important, and neither is my job. And I say, excuse me, I really need, and she's like, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wait, you know. And I'm like, this is your job, to help me find my luggage. This is urgent, I've got to be on stage. I am wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. I need my luggage, you know. And it's not that I do anything awful, but then I get in the car an hour later and I'm an exploder who shames herself, because I think of David Kitteman would have just won her to Christ, and we would see them both on a Billy Graham special 10 years from now. You know what I'm saying?
I totally do.
And so, exploder that shames herself. And then the other is the stuffer that builds barriers. This is what I would do if you hurt my feelings today and I had a reaction to you. I would determine that you're not safe. I wouldn't establish a boundary. A boundary would keep the communication up. Instead, I would make a barrier, determine you're not safe, and back off the relationship. I would just stuff the hurt down. And the last one is a stuffer that collects retaliation rocks. This is what I'll do with my husband. To keep the peace, I'll gulp down the hurt. But it's like an oyster that takes in a grain of sand, coating it until it becomes not a pearl, but a retaliation rock, where one day I've stuffed one too many times, and then I pull out all the proof of why he is not right and I am. And so those are the 4 kinds of reactions, and that's what I unpack in Unglued. We measure, you see, we're a combination of some of those, and we measure who we're reacting to, and we gauge our reactions. But because relationships are so slippery and there's emotion involved and everything is always so complicated, I encourage people in the book, not that we're going to solve this issue and you'll never react again, but our goal is to make imperfect progress. Recognizing it's going to be imperfect, But if we're always just moving forward and making a little bit of progress, then that's good.
So how do we do this? Let's pick on me for a moment. I'm a justice angry guy. I get angry when I feel I'm being just and I'm going to right the wrong in the world, which is the person who's rude to me, regardless of the fact that I've done nothing to them. I don't know them, they don't know me, they're just rude in a store or whatever, a waiter. And then I feel the need to, okay, you're rude, that's unjust. I am, what is the word, brave enough to make a fool of myself, right? And take you on and correct you. How do I, right? How do I, in that moment, imperfectly, begin to see that situation from a proper perspective, and I'm not now trying to put them in their proper place?
Okay, so let me ask you this. After you have a reaction, you put someone in place, it feels really good in the moment.
Fantastic.
And then later it doesn't feel so great, right?
Almost instantly when my eyes meet my wife's and I realize that I've been in.
Yes.
And then I'm like, then the
feeling, biblical word for donkey.
Absolutely. And I mouthed it, so therefore we don't have to beep it. So yeah, it's instantly when I realized, because my wife I know loves me, and she's not trying to crack on my knuckles. She's just realizing how bad I looked. Then I'm able to go, oh, how did that really sound? So that's what happens with me.
So I have a little statement that I try to keep in my mind, and you could take a bunch of different Bible verses, you know, gentleness turns away wrath and all. I mean, you could take a lot of Bible verses, so I'm not going to give you a Bible verse. It's a culmination of studying what truth says about this. What I would encourage you to do is sip the shame before you have to guzzle gallons of regret.
Oh, wow.
In other words, think about your wife's face before you have that reaction. Go ahead and sip that shame and go, oh yeah, I know what that tastes like, so therefore I'm not going to do this because I don't want to guzzle those gallons of regret. And so that would be a strategy. And that's what I'm teaching people are these strategies. Another one, let's say you have an issue with your wife. Okay, maybe you're like me. Like with my husband, I am, to keep the peace, I stuff it and then I collect these retaliation rocks and then he just does one thing too many and you know. So what I have to, before I can feel it coming, you know, when you get into a fight, we call those growth opportunities in my home. So before I have a growth opportunity with my husband, I feel it coming.
Oh, sure.
You know, and what I'm doing is I'm arranging all my proof of why I'm right, and I can feel it. I'm stacking my case. I can feel it coming. You know, it's like that. Is it Phil Collins? I can feel it coming in the night. Coming in the air tonight.
Great
right? Okay, right?
Oh yeah.
So you have the song, that's the soundtrack of the day. You know what I'm saying?
You're just waiting for the moment.
Yes.
I got you.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So another strategy. I have to ask myself before I have a conversation with my husband, am I trying to prove that I'm right or am I trying to improve our relationship? And that question has stopped me in my tracks so many times. Because when I try to prove that I'm right, basically I cut him down to build me up. But my real goal isn't to be right. My real goal is a better relationship. And I have to think, you know, what ultimately do I want here? Ultimately, I don't want a big, awful fight, you know? Ultimately, I don't want to tear him down. Ultimately, there is a part of me that wants to discuss this, but I have to do it under the real desire, and that is an improved relationship.
This is so good. I want to stay here because, again, and I don't mind being the test dummy here, right? Because I think, you know, my personality type would be one who thinks later. For instance, I have a phrase about myself that everybody who knows me well chuckles knowingly, and it's that you hear things the same time I do. You let that sink in for a moment.
I got it.
So there's no thought process, it just comes out.
So, okay, with my husband, because he has this sometimes, I tell him, when we first got married, he was missing his offendometer.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
It was like, think it, say it. No offendometer to like gauge that.
Yeah, zero filter.
Yep.
So I don't have a filter, okay? But one of the things I think would help somebody like me, and I struggle with this, and you know, when I say this, you're going to immediately know, because you've done your homework on this. I don't have a lot of empathy. So I want to go back, because you've given us some great things, but I want to talk about what you think empathy has to do, because you've given us some great techniques, and in that moment, right? But just a general spirit of empathy might help me never get in the situation where I feel like I've got to put the waiter in their place.
Okay.
Because they're having a rough day or possibly rough life. Talk to us about empathy and how does it play into this ability to control our emotions.
Well, I think you can take empathy, and I'm grateful that you use that word. It tends to be more of kind of a female word, you know? And so if you, what a man would say instead of empathy, they would say perspective, you know?
Yeah.
And so either way, whether you're saying empathy or perspective, what I encourage people to do is intentionally place themselves in a situation where they will gain perspective outside of your normal life. So for me, last summer, I needed a little perspective. I needed some empathy because I struggle with this too. I am female, but I am a task-oriented person, not so much people-oriented. So I'm kind of like, I understand your issues. Okay, here's 3 points to help you get over it. And I can have temporary moments of empathy, but I am not, long-term mercy eludes me, right?
Too much to do. You got to get back on with life.
Exactly. So I took myself and intentionally placed me outside of my comfortable little life. And I went and I lived at the Dream Center.
No kidding.
I did, for a week. And I took a whole team of ladies with us, and I was speaking at the Dream Center, and they offered to put me up at a hotel, and I was like, no, we're staying at the center.
That's fantastic.
With the bed bugs, with the homeless people, with the drug addicts, and we are going to do life with these people because it will give us a gift of perspective, a gift of empathy, that when we re-enter our life, the waiter not doing his job is just not something that I need to waste my emotion on.
Absolutely.
So my perspective in that, when I need that empathy, is I ask myself this question: if this is the worst thing that happens to me today, by God, it's still a great day.
Absolutely.
And that, and you don't have to go live at the Dream Center for a week. You know, you can go serve at the homeless shelter in your own hometown, or go serve at the soup kitchen, or even just go in a school where there's not a lot of parent involvement and ask if you can eat lunch with the kids or bring lunch with those kids or tutor those kids and listen to their issues. And when you go back to the restaurant and the waiter takes a little long or has an attitude, it's kind of like, by God, if this is the worst thing that happens to me today, it's still a really good day.
Yeah, right. Get over it. I feel like this is therapy with Lysa. This is fantastic. Let's share a little bit more out of my life because I think this is going to be an incredible book. Comes out in August. Is that right?
August 1st.
I think a lot of this has to do, I want to know what your perspective is on this, having written this book, about how much of this has to do with we've got to be healthy. And then when we're healthy, right? To the extent, you know, we're imperfect people, but to the extent that we can be very healthy, it would cover a multitude of these type of reactions that we screw up. I know there was a time where I was deeply angry with a family member and didn't realize it, didn't really realize it until I sat down with a professional. And when that anger, right, when I forgave, then that anger goes away and I didn't have as many of my loud outbursts. You know, I run on jet fuel. Some people run on, you know, these calm people that drive me nuts because they don't screw up like I do. You know, when you have jet fuel in your veins and you're high, but when you're low, you're loud.
Yeah.
And so I found that when I got to be a bit healthier, I saw a little bit better ability to control myself. Talk about healthiness in the context of this whole idea.
Well, you know, there's always what I call an underbelly that people have. Okay. And
meaning where we're hurting?
Yes. Where we're most vulnerable. And we do whatever we can to protect our underbelly. I found this armadillo lizard on the internet. It was the most fascinating creature. And when it's a normal looking lizard, hard shell on the outside, soft on the inside. And when it feels threatened, it curls, all that soft part curls up underneath and the hard part totally covers it. And that's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a great illustration.
And so I talk about in the book understanding where's our underbelly. And Jenny Catron, I don't know if you know Jenny.
I know Jenny,
she works at Pete Wilson's church.
I know Jenny.
She wrote a blog post about remodeling her house. And she was talking about how they'd been working on this house for a really long time, and she was embarrassed when friends would come over because they would expect to see all this awesome stuff. And Jenny was just talking about how, well, we are working really, really hard, but we're actually repairing the foundation and fixing the wiring. And when I read that, I was like, that is exactly what people have to understand about their life. We are so good about hanging pictures on the wall and calling ourselves okay. But what we're not good at is digging down into the foundation, looking at where our wiring is. And you see, what I talk about in the book is being unglued isn't all bad if it helps us examine our underbelly.
That's right.
And for you, those bouts of anger led you to go get help and examine your underbelly. It's kind of like if you flip the switch and the light doesn't come on, you know there's a problem with the wiring. And that's a good thing to know because that could be hazardous. So just because you blow up and get angry, it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person who blew up and got angry and needs to address their underbelly.
Speaking of blowing up, your first book, Made to Crave, blew up. It was a huge
Good
success.
Transition. Look at that.
That's what I do, folks.
Brilliance, people,
it's what
right
I
here.
do. Now I feel silly about it. Hey, no, but it was a big hit, and it had a huge female audience. But as you and I know, it touched a lot of men as well. And I want to talk about this. What do you think, readers? We've talked a lot about the book. This is such a very important issue. When people get unglued, men, women alike, what do you think they're going to walk away with?
Well, first of all, what I talked about, I start out the book, it's called An Invitation to Imperfect Progress. So I think right away I want them to get that it is okay to make imperfect progress. You know, sometimes I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, like if we can't do this perfectly, then we're not going to do it at all. And my point in the book is, you know, with relationships and emotions, it's a bit like nailing Jell-O to the wall. It's just not always going to be perfect. And reactions, you're not always going to get it right. But what if, because you read Unglued, what if you get it right 10% more often?
Oh, it's huge.
Might your relationships be 10% better?
Sure.
Or what if you actually get it right 50% of the time and your relationships are 50% better? Imperfect progress is good. I feel like imperfect progress is the most simple definition of the word grace. You know, and you've got to give yourself grace. I've got to give myself grace, but make that imperfect progress. And so I hope people walk away with a realistic view that they're not going to get it right all the time. I mean, in the video of Unglued, I tell the story. Of course, it's not in the book because it happened the day I turned the book in. I turned the book in, get into this awful argument with my daughter that night. I'm holding my cell phone butt dials a call. When I look at the phone, it is a minute and a half into a phone call.
Fantastic.
To my pastor.
Fantastic.
To my pastor.
Yeah, who gets to hear 90 seconds of this? Oh, man.
Yeah, and so I hit off, I throw the phone, I'm like, oh, I'm praying the most spiritual prayer. God, no, God, no, God, no, God, no. You know,
that's great.
And a text message comes through, and he says, I just got to hear a fantastic argument between you and your daughter.
Oh,
I texted him back, keeping it real, ha, ha. He texted me back.
That is painful.
At least you didn't cuss,
Fair.
ha, ha.
Good call. The silver lining.
Imperfect progress.
Yeah, you know, as you were answering that, I think it's important to say this to our audience, because I feel convicted of this. And then we'll get to our last question. But I think, you know, that 10% growth, or if it's 50%, here's what's huge. And I have 3 little ones, 6, 4, and 3. And I'm painfully aware that they're learning from how I behave, not from what I tell them. And 10% could go a long way towards developing healthy kids. Is that fair to say?
It is.
So, you know, if we can get some emotional improvement, our kids may be the manifestation of that.
That's right.
Is that fair? Okay.
That's right.
All right, last question. This is fun. And so we've been like, I feel like it's like you're on the show and it's like personal counseling. It's great. I can't wait to tell my wife how great I'm going to be over the next 30 days. I've been asking this question all day, and it's always fun to ask people this, so it reveals a bit about you. So no pressure. But if you could have lunch with just one person from the Bible, not God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, right? So no deity here, real person. Who would you have lunch with and why?
Okay. I would have lunch with Rahab. and I would want to have lunch with her because somehow in the midst of a society that saw her as nothing, she rose up and became greatness in the midst of brokenness. And I've always been fascinated. There's such a fine line between having a breakdown and a breakthrough. And somehow she crossed that line.
Wow. That's a great statement. She is LysaTerKeurst. I am Ken Coleman. We have been backstage at Catalyst West Coast, and Lysa, on behalf of Catalyst, our entire team, and our audience, thank you for stopping by. This was great stuff.
Thank you.